All right, welcome back to the Studio Reassemble series. If you have missed any of these videos, you guys can check the playlist in the description as I reassemble my studio. Okay, so in this video, I want to talk to you about reference monitor speakers. So what are reference monitor speakers? And more specifically for making beats, all right? Because again, if you're making rock music or any other type of music that isn't as bass heavy, this information may not apply to you, because as a beat maker, what we really are focused on is hearing that low end, because most speakers in general will allow you to hear like the high end with the tweeter, right? But we are focused on that low end. So really, what size of speaker do we need? What brand of speaker should you be looking at? And these are just some things I want to talk about in this video, okay? So again, before we get into it, if you guys want to learn to make professional beats, you guys can visit me over at itsGratuiTous.com. I run a beat maker trainer platform. There's over 34 FL Studio courses. If you have any questions, always feel free to send me an email. All right. So a reference monitor speaker, I'm just going to give you the absolute basics, the common knowledge of what you'll find out there, and then I'll give some of my own opinions and thoughts at the end of the video here. So a reference monitor speaker, the whole goal of them is for what we call translation. We want the speaker to be flat, whereas if you go to a store and purchase speakers, many times other speakers are designed to kind of boost certain frequencies or cut certain frequencies to make it sound more pleasing for the listener. But a reference monitor speaker is supposed to be flat, but I say that with air quotes because every brand, every speaker is going to sound a little bit different. So as a beat maker, there's a couple things you need to learn to get the sound that you're wanting. Number one is you have to learn your speakers. Doesn't matter what speaker it is, you just have to learn that particular speaker. The second thing is you have to learn your room, right? If your room's really echoey, then you have to learn how your room sounds, all right? The third is you actually have to learn how to mix, all right? Mixing is a very, very high skill. It takes a lot of years, a lot of practice, a lot of patience, and you never get the results you want until you finally do, and it takes a lot of time. So those three factors come into play: learning your speakers, learning your room, and learning how to mix, because the goal is translation. For example, this speaker to the right is a little small speaker, right? You want the mix sounding the same, even though it's not able to produce the same frequencies. So in other words, if we're listening on this speaker, it should sound normal. It should sound balanced. We listen on here, it should sound the same thing, except just, oh, now we're hearing that low end. It sounds better because, now you can hear the whole frequency spectrum. Okay, so a reference monitor speaker, it's supposed to be flat, which means that when you go to mix your music, that you can make accurate adjustments in terms of your EQ when it comes to your high end, your mids, your lows. Okay, that's what we call flat. And the goal is translation. So what you're mixing in your studio, that it's going to sound good on consumer headphones. And so when I say consumer speakers, I'm talking like, let's say, Apple earbuds. So for example, anyone who owns like an Apple phone who doesn't make music, they may listen to your music on their earbuds, right? So these consumer headphones are a little different than studio speakers, because the goal is here that the speaker itself is not making your music sound good. We want truthful speakers that are representing the audio as is, so that we could make our mixing decisions. Okay, so understand that. Okay, now the first thing I really want to talk about is the size of the speaker. And the best way to do that is to tell you my story of how, when I was purchasing my first equipment for making beats, how that went for me, okay? So when I first started, I found out about reference monitor speakers, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I want to take music production seriously. I want to learn to make better beats. So I purchased 5-inch reference monitor speakers. These ones here are 8-inch, okay? So we have two speakers in this speaker cabinet. It is a tweeter and a woofer, okay? And when we talk about a 5-inch woofer or a 5-inch reference monitor speaker, we are talking about the woofer size. And then typically the tweeter is usually around 1 inch, all right? So my very first set of reference monitor speakers, I purchased a 5-inch reference monitor speaker. And if you know anything about speakers, the bigger the woofer, the lower the frequencies, okay? So in other words, you can hear more bass. And a 5-inch reference monitor speaker for making beats will not give you the bass that you're looking for, all right? I remember I purchased those 5-inch reference monitor speakers. I brought them home. I unboxed them. You know, I was making beats for a bit, so I was ready to now upgrade, and I was excited to hear my music on the new reference monitor speakers. Plugged it in, listened to the music, and the first thing I thought was, where's the bass? I was like, I thought that these speakers were going to be like amazing, like they're little studio speakers. So the size of the speaker you have to think about. But there's a couple problems. First of all, the size of the room, right? If your room's pretty small, these are pretty big. You know, in the video, it might not look very big, but an 8-inch speaker is big and it's heavy. All right. A 5-inch reference monitor speaker can fit on your desk, but again, there's no bass. So what can you do? So you can get a 5-inch reference monitor speaker if you want. And for me personally, I actually have a subwoofer. Okay, so you can kind of see in the back a little bit right where my finger is back there, those cables. I'll share a better picture here in the video because I've already covered a lot of this stuff through this Studio Reassemble series when I was reassembling my monitors, my speakers, audio interface. The next video coming up will be about a MIDI keyboard. So anyways, 5-inch reference monitor speaker will not be able to give you that low end that you're looking for. However, you could get a left and right 5-inch reference monitor speaker, and then you could pair that 5-inch reference monitor speaker with a subwoofer to give you that low end. Now, when you're looking at speakers, it's very important that you do look at the specs, but you got to be a little bit careful about the specifications because just because it says it on paper doesn't really mean like that's the experience you're going to get. But anyways, so what I'm trying to say is if you look at a 5-inch reference monitor speaker, you know, they might go down to, let's say, like 70 hertz. But again, when we're making beats, that low end, like that 50 hertz, 60 hertz, even, you know, maybe 45 hertz. Like we need to hear that for our bass line, our kick, the punch of the kick. And again, the 5-inch reference monitor speaker is not going to really give you that. But again, with a subwoofer, it would. Let's just quickly talk about buying reference monitor speakers. So for cheaper reference monitor speakers, a lot of times companies will give you the left and right all in one for one purchase. It might be like $300 for your left and right, and you know you need your TRS cable. So I will share that here just quickly with you. So to plug in these speakers, you want a TRS cable. We will cover this in just a moment, and then you may also see XLR out there, but most audio interfaces do not have an XLR output. They mainly have the TRS and really focus on those two rings. All right, it's what we call a balanced cable. So when buying reference monitor speakers, the lower end speakers, and I think very often even just like the 5-inch in general, when you purchase them, you usually get the left and right together. Okay, it's kind of like a little bundle deal. Once you start getting up to a better speaker, you are actually starting to buy the speaker by itself. So for example, this speaker, this has gone through a couple different generations. So I don't want to just give a price number, but let's just say that the price of this speaker is, let's say, $350 just by itself. So you need to actually purchase 2 of them. So for a total of $700, and then again, plus tax. So the price starts jumping up a little bit once you start going to a better speaker. Okay, so just keep that in mind that lower end speakers, typically you buy both the left and right together. Once it starts getting more expensive, you are purchasing them individually. Another thing to mention is when we talk about a speaker configuration, so this is a 2-way speaker. So we have a tweeter, which does the highs, and then we have a woofer, and there's what's called a crossover, all right? And then that splits the frequencies so that the tweeter just plays the high end, and then the woofer will play like the mids and the lows. And sometimes you can purchase a speaker with a 3-way configuration. So there's 3 speakers, and that would have 2 crossovers. So you'd have like a high, tweeter, you'd have like a mid driver, and then kind of like a low mid driver. And then again, for myself, I really do like a subwoofer. It just allows me to hear that low end. And when we are having a subwoofer, the volume is very, very quiet. Like we don't want it very loud. We just want to hear just a little bit of the extra fullness on that low end. Okay. So that pretty much covers, the basics of a reference monitor speaker, right? It allows us to hear the audio truthfully so that when we go to mix, that hopefully our mixes can sound pretty, can translate pretty well out there. And again, translation means that it sounds pretty good on most audio systems, that if you listen on this little speaker or you listen here, that it's still the same experience. It's just once you go to a bigger speaker, now you hear more of, the whole frequency spectrum, the low end, the high end, etc. Okay, so I guess it's time to switch the speaker around. I'll just share the back with you. We'll talk about audio connections here quickly, and then that will be this video about what is a reference monitor speaker. All right. In terms of brands, again, I never really like to talk to you guys about brands because brands change all the time. So my channel isn't really a review channel. I will be talking maybe like, if I do reviews, it's just because of products that I personally own and, just giving you a breakdown on. But again, talking about brands and reviews, it's not really what I want to get into, right? My business is all about beat making education. So if you guys want to learn FL Studio making beats, you guys just visit me over at itsGratuiTous.com. All right, so just quickly here on the back. So one other thing I forgot to mention is these are called active speakers. And so the amplifier is actually built in. All you have to do is you just give it power right here down where my thumb is. You just give it power and you just simply turn on the switch, okay? So you have your volume control. Sometimes it's nice to match the left and right speaker. So if the left speaker is a little bit louder than the right speaker, then maybe you just want to turn it down just a little bit, just so that you are able to hear your music balanced on both the left and right speaker. Okay. Right here is where we can plug in our speakers. So you just want to plug one in, and these are called balanced cables. So this is XLR and this is TRS, and I'll share that now with the cables. So this is a TRS cable. Most audio interfaces will have a TRS output, or like a 1/4 inch output, and you want to use a balanced cable so that there's not as much noise and you can run your cables much longer, okay? This is called an XLR cable, all right? We typically are using these for microphones a lot, but depending on your equipment, you may be using XLR. So these are the same cable, just a different configuration, like a different plugin. This is a bit of a stronger connection, but these work perfectly fine too. Okay, so TRS would be plugging into number 2 right here, or the XLR would be plugging into number 1. And again, same thing. So you just want to choose one. But again, off your audio interface, it's probably going to be 1/4 inch. And my recommendation is always just to buy your cables, your speaker cables, just a little bit longer than what you need, because it's always nice to be able to move your cables around or your speakers around whenever you want. Okay, and then here you just have some configurations. My recommendation to you is to leave it flat. So in other words, don't adjust any of these. Listen to your music for a while. Start mixing, do your stuff. And if you're starting to notice problems, then you can start adjusting this stuff a little bit. So for example, if there is if you find that when you're mixing your music, it's always too bright, for me, I would probably just boost up the high trim. I'd make the speakers brighter. So which means when I'm mixing my music, I'd probably be starting to turn things down a little bit in my mix, hoping to kind of compensate for that brightness. Another thing to mention is some speakers nowadays are starting to have software built in for room correction. And so what that means is when we have a home studio, if it is not properly acoustically treated, so in other words, there's going to be a lot of echoes, or when you have your frequencies, there could be what we call phase cancellation, when the frequencies kind of bounce off the wall and they kind of hit each other. They can cancel, which means that you actually don't hear certain frequencies. Room correction software is supposed to help with that stuff. I haven't had the best experience over my years. Maybe I will look into that in the future again, but sometimes speakers are starting to have that stuff built in. Like I was saying in a previous video, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I haven't personally tested, because for me, over my years of learning to make beats, I've just always learned my speakers, learned my room, and for the most part, it's given me a pretty good experience. So just keep in mind that the room correction software, is it just a marketing thing? Maybe. Does it really, really work very good? Maybe. So just keep that in mind. All right. So this is just a typical kind of older speaker. It's done me really, really good over the years. I've been pretty happy with this Yamaha. This is the Yamaha HS80Ms, I believe. So you can see my model right there. So this is an older school one. There is, this particular speaker has gone through a couple generation changes, but it is a pretty good speaker. I have enjoyed it. And then here is just the back of this speaker here. So this is just a little single speaker, and I just put it on there just to show you a cool little looking speaker. You just plug in an XLR or a TRS, got your volume and your power switch, okay? And a little heat sink here for if the speaker gets hot. All right, so going back to the speaker configuration. So again, this is a two-way speaker. These are typically lower end speakers, two-way speakers. Once you start going to more higher end, more expensive speakers, you will start seeing three-way speakers, because that's going to allow each speaker to kind of shine in its own area. Okay. But here you can see this is just a single speaker. There's no crossover. So a little single mono speaker like this is a good choice because you're able to hear your music with no crossover. It's just a single speaker, and it can help you listen just like that mid-range of the music. All right, this is a popular thing in the industry. You want to send your music to mono as you listen to it in here for any phase cancellation. And again, it's just another way to test your music for that translation. Okay, and this is my current setup. I just have a left speaker, I have a right speaker that's on one bank of speakers, and then my audio interface has a monitor controller. I hit bank B, make sure to go to mono, and then I listen through this. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video about what is a reference monitor speaker. It is supposed to be flat sounding so that when we mix our music, we are going to get translation in the real world, because you just want to hear our music as is. We don't want our speaker amplifying certain frequencies or cutting certain frequencies to make it sound more pleasing. We want to hear truthfulness out of the speakers so that when we're mixing our music, we can make accurate decisions, and then hopefully it can translate out there in the real world. Okay, you will find mixing is very, very hard. All right. So if you guys have any questions, leave comments below. If you guys want to learn to make beats, check out my FL Studio courses at itsGratuiTous.com, and I will talk to you in another video. If you're wanting to learn FL Studio, check out the 3 exclusive videos I have for you. You can get them by going to itsGratuiTous.com/FL Studio. I hope to see you inside.